Welcome to Coping with Change, Grief, and Loss. This session is for people living with dementia or caring for someone who is. You may be watching today for a number of reasons. Perhaps you're finding yourself reacting to things a little differently than you usually do. Maybe you find you're struggling with energy. You may feel that everything is heightened, or you may feel numb. Maybe you're feeling a myriad of unexpected emotions and not really understanding why. This session explores some of the reasons you may be feeling the way you are and talks about some strategies to help you and those around you cope in the face of the changes brought on by dementia and a pandemic. If you find that after watching this webinar, you would benefit from speaking with someone from the Alzheimer Society of BC, I encourage you to call the First Link Dementia Helpline. The phone number for the helpline can be found on the last slide of this recording, as well as in the description box of this video. I want to start with a quote that many people watching may already be familiar with. You cannot change the direction of the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Take a moment to reflect on this. How has this applied to you in your life? How does it apply to your situation now? Dementia is present in your life. You didn't ask for it, and neither did your family members, but you are all affected by it in different ways. We can't change dementia's presence or take away its impact. Just like the wind, it's ever-changing and can't be controlled. You can, however, adjust your sails to cope with the changes dementia brings. Today we're going to look at some of the adjustments that can be made. The dementia journey is full of unknowns. From the time symptoms start impacting daily life, those affected by dementia, which is both the person living with the disease and the people in their support network, will become entangled in uncertainty. Even before a diagnosis is received, there is usually a feeling that something is off. If a diagnosis has been made, you may be wondering, what now? What will the future look like for me, for us? The uncertainty continues as you navigate the changes in your social lives, your home, healthcare services, your relationship, and all the other areas dementia impacts. Many of these changes can feel like loss. Loss of lifestyle, job, or hobby. Loss of the relationship you used to have. Not knowing when another loss will come or what exactly it will look like can be mentally and emotionally draining. You may find yourself looking back on what your old normal was and wondering if you will ever feel a sense of normal again. It can feel like you're living in a state of perpetual change, and in many ways that's true. These quotes come directly from people living with dementia and caregivers who have been willing to share their experiences. I hope they can really exemplify that you are not alone in feeling the incredible impact dementia has. Certainly, I miss the abilities I'm losing. I am reminded daily of the losses. It's a strange world I'm trapped in. On a bad day, even my solutions have problems. And a caregiver said that Alzheimer's caregivers ride the world's biggest, fastest, scariest emotional roller coaster every day. Do any of these quotes resonate with you in particular? What would you add? The changing winds of the dementia journey mean you may experience a whirlwind of emotional states. These emotions can be experienced and re-experienced in any order, and there are no time limits to how long you spend in each emotional state. People work through these emotions differently. You may be experiencing shock while your partner is experiencing denial. Then you shift into acceptance as another family member dives into sadness. It can be tough when the people in your life are in different emotional places. As I talk through some of these emotions, think about what emotions have been particularly significant to you. Maybe it's something you don't even see here. What do you feel is missing? A diagnosis of dementia can come as a shock. In some cases, it may also be a relief, giving an explanation for concerns and fears of what's going on. When we ignore or try to push away our feelings, they can lead us to feel numb. Sometimes this too can feel like a bit of a relief in the moment, but it's a really hard place to stay, and we can end up missing out on so much. In the beginning, a degree of denial or disbelief can in some ways be a positive, protective force. You might be thinking, this can't be happening to me, or it's not as bad as the doctor says. We use denial to shield ourselves from painful news while we adjust inwardly to a new reality. W.J. Anthony said, "A degree of denial is essential. Like drinking hot coffee, we sip the truth of our condition carefully and gently." Many people feel angry and frustrated about the diagnosis. They may be angry at themselves, at others, at the situation itself. Despondency and sadness are often reoccurring emotions throughout the journey with the changes that come. And there's acceptance too. Acceptance does not mean that you're happy about the situation. With acceptance, you're accepting the problem rather than avoiding it, realizing you are ready to make changes. You respond to a new reality. Acceptance will involve recognizing and becoming reconciled to the limits of the body. Acceptance is hard. You can't force yourself to feel it overnight, and it, too, is not a permanent state. It is something that weaves in and out of our emotional lives, along with other feelings. You may feel more accepting of a change and the new normal one day or one moment, only to be thrown back into sadness, denial, or anger the very next. Acceptance may come and go depending on the day. This is normal, and it's okay. As I said before, the dementia journey is full of unknowns, and everyone will experience it in their own way. One thing that is consistent, however, is that dementia is a disease characterized by change, from even before a diagnosis is made through the course of the illness. Recognizing this, it can be helpful to understand how humans process change. There are 3 stages that happen with any change: an ending, a time of transition, or what we might call the neutral zone, and the new beginning. This is called the psychological state of change. Adjusting to change begins when you experience a loss or an end of something and begin to grieve how things were before the change. The time when the old is no more, but the new is not yet clear, is when we're in the transition or the neutral zone. This is a bit of a limbo period where you may find yourself unsure of how you feel, or overwhelmed and unclear of how best to adjust. This is one of the many reasons the pandemic has been so hard on people. We've collectively spent a long time in the neutral zone after experiencing many personal ends to the way things were for us before, often without any clear idea of what to expect in the future. The neutral zone is often a time of confusion, and you may experience grief, anger, denial, fear, and also acceptance. While the transition phase can be very uncomfortable, it's also a time when you can explore your options and make choices that will help ease your acceptance of a new reality. Moving through the transition brings you to a new beginning, the final phase where you are able to settle into your new reality that's been prompted by the change. The length of time it takes to move through this psychological state of change varies, and it is very individual. It depends on the environment the change is taking place in, how you've coped with change in the past, and the nature of the change itself. Human beings have a built-in ability to adjust to change and hardship. It's what we call resilience. We all have this in us to varying degrees. Building resilience can take time and practice. It isn't about making problems go away. It's about building skills that can help you manage stress so you can cope with the change and enjoy the life you have. Just watching this recording today is an example of your practicing and building resilience. You're dedicating time to focusing on how you can cope with the change and loss dementia brings. We'll specifically discuss some strategies for how you can grow your resilience later on in this webinar by exploring ways to manage challenging emotions that are common on the dementia journey. So recognizing that the way people move through the psychological state of change varies and depends on a number of different factors, it can be helpful to recognize what typically makes it easier for people to adjust to change. Generally, we adjust more readily to changes in life that are our choice, that have a net gain, as in the perceived benefits outweigh the losses, and to changes that are final. Thinking about this list, not one of the things that helps humans adjust to change can be attributed to dementia. I really want to validate how hard these changes may have been and may continue to be for you. Although dementia is often recognized as an illness characterized by losses, this doesn't mean it's unrelentingly negative. Through learning about the disease and developing ways of coping, there can be some wonderful moments of grace along the dementia journey. We often get to hear of really special experiences or connections that may not have come about without dementia being in the picture. For example, some people share how dementia actually contributed to improving or deepening connections between them and the person they're caring for. In some cases, dementia provides an invitation to put aside past conflicts or differences and build a closer relationship. Some people find great satisfaction at times being able to give back to someone who has cared for them and see the positive effect their care has on the quality of life for the person they're supporting. Some people appreciate the continual reminder to live in the moment and relish the time they still have together. Think about taking some time to reflect on the losses and gains dementia has brought to your life, whether you're living with the disease causing dementia yourself or caring for someone who is. For example, are your relationships the same as they were before? Is your lifestyle the same? What does living with dementia look like for you? Some examples of what people affected by dementia have shared with us might resonate with you. We've heard that relationships with other friends or family members are often profoundly changed. Some for the better, like mentioned before, and some for the poorer. For example, when friends stop calling because they just don't know what to say. People have shared changes in lifestyle, like those who loved to travel but became more limited as dementia progressed, until trips together were no longer feasible. Both care partners and people with dementia have shared the grief that can be associated with the profound changes in conversational abilities that dementia can prompt, or about the change in their independence. the lack of freedom to do the things they wanted, how they wanted, when they wanted. All change, whether negative or positive, involves loss. This may be a loss of identity, your relationship with the person you're caring for, or who is caring for you, or a sense of control or comfort. We can look at loss as a type of change or transition. When you acknowledge the loss and let go of your old reality and the expectations that will no longer be met, it gives the opportunity to focus on the relationship as it is in any given moment. In the book, The Way of Transition, William Bridges proposes 4 principal aspects of loss. Disengagement is a part of loss we feel when there are changes to a situation that we're used to and are familiar with. For example, moving, a job change, an illness all shake up what our normal feels like. Disidentification is what we feel when we are transitioning from what was to what will be. It describes a change in the way we identify ourselves. For example, someone may no longer say, "I'm a retired teacher" or "volunteer," and instead identify foremost as a caregiver. Disenchantment is the realization that you have been torn away from your old reality, a reality that you accepted without thought. For example, you may have had an image of what retirement would look like, and now must accept a new reality that is different from the one you had anticipated. Disorientation is the uncertainty that comes from not knowing what's going to happen. The familiar ways in which you structured your time and your day-to-day lives are gone, and nothing has come forward to replace them yet. You may feel like you're lost in the middle of nowhere without a map. Transitioning through change takes time. It doesn't just happen overnight. It is still really important to try to work through the change, though. If we don't try to work through the change, we risk becoming stuck in a past reality that is no longer possible to maintain. Accepting the new reality and letting go of the old one certainly doesn't mean you are immune from the pain and loss, but it can help you to stop fighting with yourself and the person you're caring for or who's caring for you, and this can lower stress levels for both of you. When we experience a loss, we experience feelings of grief with it. Because the dementia journey brings a marathon of change, living with dementia in your life can bring constant grief in various forms, whether they're easy to recognize or not. Grief is universal. It is a normal and necessary human response to any loss, both big and small. You may feel grief when you first hear the diagnosis, or when you can no longer remember how to make a recipe that you've been cooking your whole life, or when you see changes in a family member or friend. Even if you feel you're at a place of acceptance, others may be in a different place in their grief process. As dementia progresses, the losses that accompany the changes accumulate and can begin to overflow into other areas. This can express itself in ways sometimes unexpectedly. You may experience physical changes, having low energy or feeling weak or worn out. You may have poor sleep patterns, changes in appetite, or experience physical pain or discomfort. Psychological change can induce poor concentration, forgetfulness, or impatience. As we've been discussing, grief can be expressed through a variety of emotions. Grief causes some people to withdraw from others, or to react to situations differently or out of character. Some people process grief through spiritual practices like prayer, contemplation, or other practices they find meaningful to them. Dementia often challenges our perceptions of grief as something that occurs after the death of someone we care about. As people progress through the dementia journey, it's common to experience two specific types of grief that aren't often recognized or talked about. The first, anticipatory grief, is a reaction to the losses that haven't happened yet, but are expected in the future. For example, feeling sad or exhibiting denial during discussions around driving cessation down the road. When we believe loss is imminent and will become a new reality, the thought of the loss can bring a grief reaction long before the change actually happens. Anticipated losses, grief reactions, and the need for adaptation are part of daily experience for people affected by dementia. Grief within the dementia experience is often disenfranchised, meaning it's not openly acknowledged, socially supported, or publicly shared. Unfortunately, there is still stigma associated with dementia. And while many people living with dementia and others affected by it work hard to fight this stigma, the secrecy of a dementia diagnosis or lack of understanding around what living with dementia means can add to this disenfranchisement, the feeling of being alone in your grief. A caregiver shared with us they wished someone had told them how alone you can feel, how little understanding others have of this disease. How do these descriptions of grief reflect your experience? Can you relate to feeling grief about the losses you're expecting in the future? Or feeling like you can't share how you're feeling with others because they won't get it? I want to take a moment to acknowledge that depression can coexist with grief. This is important to keep in mind when you're having challenges coping. It can be hard to distinguish depression from grief. Depression is actually a chemical change or imbalance in the brain. For someone living with dementia, symptoms of depression and anxiety can be a direct result of damage that's happening in the brain, or can be side effects of medication. According to the World Health Organization, up to 50% of people living with dementia and 32% of family care partners experience depression at some point along the dementia journey. It's important to diagnose depression in people living with dementia because depression can be a cause of delirium, making the symptoms of dementia worse, like increased forgetfulness, confusion, withdrawal, or anxiety. The good news is that the symptoms of depression respond well to medications and counseling or other mental health support, which can reduce the symptoms experienced. If you or someone you know is experiencing depression, we really encourage you to speak to a healthcare provider you trust. Untreated, depression usually continues to get worse. But if treated, you may experience relief from the symptoms it causes. Guilt is a feeling that can be really common for caregivers and people living with dementia. Have you felt guilty about something in the past week or the past month? When we ask this question at in-person workshops, we'll usually see hands slowly raise until almost everyone in the room has theirs up. Even though so many people affected by dementia share this experience, care partners and people living with dementia often feel very alone in their experience of guilt. It's not something people often talk or hear about explicitly, so the experience can feel very isolating. We make a point to address guilt so that you know if it's something you experience, you are in good company with others going through similar experiences. Whether you are someone living with dementia or supporting someone who is, you will likely find yourself feeling guilty at some point or another along the way. Guilt and grief are actually closely related on the dementia journey, and where you find one, you will often find the other. Guilt can be thought of as anger directed at oneself or someone else. It's a feeling that actually gives us some useful information. It's an emotional warning sign that comes from a belief that one's violated a moral value. Its purpose is to let us know when we've done something wrong and help us develop a better sense of our behavior and how it affects ourselves and others. It prompts us to re-examine our behavior so that we don't end up making the same mistake twice. Think about your experience of guilt. Is it influencing your behavior? One of the challenges can be, though, that sometimes our beliefs and values have trouble translating or catching up to the actual present situation. Maybe you feel guilty at times for losing your temper or feeling negatively towards the other person. In some cases, it can prompt guilt when wanting some time away or to take time for yourself, for asking for help. On the flip side, you might experience guilt for not spending as much time as you would like in other areas of your life. And while these seem like opposite problems, unfortunately, experiencing guilt for one does not make someone immune to experience guilt for the other. Some really painful prompts for guilt can come up around thinking you're not doing enough, or visiting enough, or spending enough time together. Or for breaking promises you said you would always keep. Guilt is often associated with expectations, and as mentioned, sometimes our expectations get stuck in the psychological state of change and don't line up with the current lived reality. We really encourage you to reflect on what expectations might be factoring into your experience of guilt. Have you set high and unrealistic expectations? Are you feeling guilty because you're not living up to those expectations? Feeling guilty is exhausting. It can drain you of the mental and physical energy that you need to cope with the symptoms of dementia or to care for someone who is. So, how do you manage it? Before discussing specific suggestions for managing guilt and grief, I'll ask you to reflect on two questions. How have you coped with difficult situations in the past? Was your method of coping successful? Think about a time when you had to solve a tough problem or manage a crisis. What got you through that time? How did you cope with that situation? At some point in our lives, we've all had to navigate difficult situations, some more successfully than others. Think about your successes. What are you good at? How can you take that skill and apply it today? You might reflect, too, on some of the less successful experiences. In hindsight, what might you have done differently that you could do now? You already have a skill set to deal with difficult situations. These skills make up a toolkit that you can use now. And hopefully by the end of this recording, you might have added a tool or two or remembered some of the tools you already have that you might not have thought of before. It's really important to acknowledge what it is you're feeling. Trying to ignore emotions will only make it harder to deal with the changes that gave rise to them in the first place. The antidote to coping with feelings of guilt and grief includes a rational examination. Ask yourself, what have I actually done wrong? And then try to show yourself compassion. Feelings of grief, in particular, often get mistaken for other things. I feel so guilty when I'm out enjoying myself, might more accurately be, I feel so sad that we're not able to do this enjoyable activity together anymore. So what you might think of as guilt is actually grief in disguise. To process losses in a healthy and healing way, we need to understand the grief process. This involves acknowledging and naming the emotions you're experiencing. Are you feeling guilty, angry, jealous, sad, in denial? Give it a name. These are all normal reactions in grief. Even if we don't name the losses in our life, we often have a grief response to them. So much anguish is caused by denial of our feelings or circumstances. This wastes time and energy and usually makes things harder than they need to be. When we allow ourselves to accept what we're feeling, relief and change become possible. Keep in mind that awareness of and ability to recognize these losses will change as dementia progresses due to the changes in the brain that affect thinking skills. If feelings of grief are repressed rather than addressed, then they will continue to manifest in ways that may create additional challenges. This could look like anger at a family member, frustration with a healthcare provider, exhaustion, depression, and even pain or illness. Appropriately naming a loss as grief can help you to cope with some of the changes in behavior in yourself and the person you're caring for or who's caring for you. It can also help you to break down the barriers that prevent you from taking care of yourself. It can be common to think, I don't have time, or help costs money, or no one can do it like I can. It may be that when you look for it, there is time and money, but these strong emotions are preventing your brain's ability to think logically and to find the solutions. Allow yourself to feel the loss and grief. Identify what's causing you to feel guilty. Is it a specific situation you're going through, or a thought or feeling that you're having? Why do you think you feel guilty in that situation, or when you have those thoughts and feelings? What are your expectations of yourself, of others? What role might your expectations have in the guilt or grief you're feeling? For example, if the source of your guilt is a concern over making a mistake, then working to increase your skills by learning more about dementia and ways of coping, such as through education like this, may be helpful for reducing this concern and helping you manage feelings of guilt. Identifying it can also help you practice self-compassion. Is it realistic to expect yourself to never make a mistake? Would you have that expectation of anyone else? If you saw someone you love going through what you're going through, would you hold them to the same standards? While we are huge advocates of learning and raising awareness at the Alzheimer Society, unfortunately, no amount of learning in the world can guarantee that anyone would never make a mistake. Talk about your grief and reflect on your own grieving process and what works best for you. Finding ways to express the loss you're feeling helps to connect your logical understanding of the loss with your emotional understanding of it. When you're experiencing intense emotions in the moment, stop what you're doing. Some people find it helpful to even visualize a stop sign. Find a quiet space to limit distractions. Take 4 or 5 slow, deep breaths and try to clear your mind by counting to 10 or maybe singing a meaningful song or reciting a meaningful message. Understand that your grieving process is uniquely yours, and how you experience grief will depend on your personality, your past experience with loss, the impact of the loss, and the length of time and frequency over which the losses are experienced. Think about what restores you, what helps to fill you up or give you some respite from your grief. If you picture your grief as a balloon or a cup of water, what type of support do you need to let a little air out of the balloon or spill some of the water out of your emotional cup? For example, a walk in the park may be restorative, good self-care, and a welcome distraction. Reflecting on the walks you used to take together is grief work. Or you may need a break to focus on something completely different. How beautiful the flowers are this time of year. How refreshing it can be to take in the outdoor air. The joy of kids playing on the playground or dogs running through the dog park. The fuller your balloon or cup is at any given time, the more pressing the need is for you to let some of the contents out. And share how you feel with others who understand and won't judge you for your feelings. If you know someone else who has gone or is going through a similar experience, try sharing how you're feeling with them. Avoid isolating yourself and find ways to stay socially connected with others in your life. Even if that doesn't mean in person, we're now used to so many ways to connect from a distance. Consider joining a support group, whether virtually or in person. Write in a journal, paint a picture, go for a walk. Find a safe and productive way to get those feelings out. While focusing on a feeling can feel really intense, the intensity often decreases if it can be expressed. Take some time to make note of ways you get some respite from your grief, or spill some of the water out of your overflowing emotional cup. What do you do for yourself? If you're asking yourself this and can't think of anything, I encourage you to think of something small that doesn't take much additional time out of your day. What's something you look forward to in your day that you can do intentionally? How can you get more enjoyment out of everyday routines like taking a shower or having a cup of coffee or getting to and from appointments? Try to focus on the things you can do, not the things that have become too difficult. Experiment with ways to modify activities. If reading has become difficult, try audiobooks. If you're not able to attend your exercise class anymore, try doing an exercise video at home. You may have a good laugh over your attempts at some of the moves. Just make sure that whatever you're trying doesn't generate more stress or safety concerns. If something seems difficult, take a break. This can be as quick as stepping outside for a minute or two for some fresh air. Keeping up with the changes of dementia is a very demanding job. Taking time for yourself will help to restore your physical and mental energy to cope better with the changes. Taking a break also provides you with the emotional distance needed to put your feelings into perspective. Keep in mind that changes in the brain can make it difficult for people living with dementia to process change and think through it. Find meaning and purpose in your day. We all need to have a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. This need is as normal as the need for food and shelter. As what you're able to do changes because of dementia, try to find new ways in which you can find meaning and purpose. And ask for help. For many people, this is much easier said than done. Many people feel uncomfortable reaching out and asking for support or help. You may not want to impose or be concerned about how the task is done. Consider, are these reasons logical or rational? Are they appropriate? especially now given the current situation, you may be surprised how many people are happy to deliver groceries if this is a challenge for you, for example. Ask someone to bring a meal over, or 2 or 3, to ease some of the demand of preparing food. Some community organizations like United Way or local seniors organizations have more formalized supports in place to connect you to others in the community who are willing and able to help. Call 211 to find out what resources are available in your community. You can make time to do activities you enjoy with positive people. When you feel hopeless, talk to someone about how you feel. Often, others can shed a brighter perspective on the situation. This is one of the reasons people join a support group. Establish a sense of extended community by building a support network. Strengthen the bonds with the people who see you through the ups and downs, and with whom you share the hopes and fears. Staying connected to children and grandchildren can give you perspective. Use inspiring photos, posters, or quotes. Hang them around your home. Some people carry notes with positive affirmations to bolster hope. There are lots of things you can do to help you adjust to your changing abilities. For changes in memory, for example, you can keep a routine. Have a regular way and time to do things. Some people find it helpful to use a notebook to hold information that's important. Keep it with you at all times. It may contain your address, important phone numbers and names, a list of things to do, appointments, and any thoughts or ideas you want to hold on to. One of the most important things is to remember to be kind to yourself. If you notice negative thoughts running through your mind, give yourself some reassuring words. Something short and simple like, "I'm having a hard time today. We all have bad days." This can help calm your emotions by offering some self-compassion. When you catch yourself having unhealthy or negative thoughts, consider what you'd say to a loved one or a dear friend in that moment. It takes time, but with practice, we can rewire the brain to think and speak more compassionately with ourselves. It's so important to recognize the changes that are happening are not your fault. You are doing the best you can. It takes a lot of courage to travel the long and difficult dementia journey, and no one comes into this with all the answers. No one gets through the journey never making mistakes. There will be mistakes. There will be hard days. You may lose your temper at some points because it's simply all too much. Take a deep breath. If you're able to, go for a walk or step away and reset. Keep in mind that everyone's situation is different. Try to avoid comparing yourself to the situations of others and be realistic about your limits and what you can and are willing to do. Know that while things will never be the same, you will adjust to the losses. Life with dementia will continue to bring changes. It may feel like you have no control, and it's true that there's a lot you cannot change. But it's important to recognize that there is a lot you can do. By learning about dementia and implementing the self-care strategies talked about today, you can better adjust your sails and ride the waves dementia brings without them bringing you under. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, "I will try again tomorrow." And here are the numbers for the helpline. If you have questions about information you've heard here, or if you have questions or could use support around your own experience with dementia, please don't hesitate to call our First Link Dementia Helpline. Services are available in English Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And services are also available 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday in Punjabi, Cantonese, and Mandarin. Thank you for watching today.